My name's Monica, and I don't remember a time when my parents weren't fighting. Their screaming matches are some of my earliest memories, filling our house with tension so thick you could cut it with a knife. I was just a kid, but even then, I knew something was seriously wrong. I was 4 when everything came to a head. Mom and Dad's arguments had gotten worse, if that was even possible. One night, I woke up to the sound of shattering glass and my mom yelling, "That's it, Mark, I've had enough." The next morning, Dad was gone. Just like that, my family was torn in two. It didn't take long for Dad to move on. Within months, he'd remarried some woman named Caroline and moved across town. From then on, our relationship became a joke. He'd call on holidays, his voice distant and awkward like he was talking to a stranger, not his own kid. The rest of the year, the only sign I had of father was the monthly alimony check he sent to Mom. Mom, for her part, was a mess. Linda Thompson, once the picture of a happy housewife, now a single mother, struggling to keep it together. She threw herself into her work as a real estate agent, but it was obvious she was floundering. I was 7 when Mom started getting weird. She'd always been a bit impulsive, but this was different. One day, she came home with a bunch of books and DVDs about day trading. "This is it, Monica," she said, her eyes shining with a manic gleam that scared me a little. "We're going to be rich." For weeks, she was glued to her computer, muttering about stocks and trades. She'd forget to pick me up from school, or to make dinner. When I'd ask her to play with me, she'd wave me off. "Not now, sweetie. Mommy's working on our future." But our future wasn't looking too bright. I learned to fend for myself pretty quick. By 8, I could make my own meals, even if it was just a peanut butter sandwich, do my own laundry, and get myself ready for school. Mom was too caught up in her get-rich-quick schemes to notice. Things came to a head when I was 9. Mom burst into my room one day, her eyes wild with excitement. "I'm going on a trip to Bali. I've found someone who can help us, sweetie. He's going to show me how to unlock my luck chakra. This is going to change everything." I didn't know what a luck chakra was, but I knew it sounded like trouble. And just like that, I was shipped off to Aunt Rachel's, my mom's friend, while Mom chased her latest crazy scheme halfway across the world. For 6 long weeks, I lived with Aunt Rachel while Mom was off on her spiritual journey in Bali. Don't get me wrong, Rachel was great. She really tried to make things normal for me. "Come on, Monica," she'd say with forced cheerfulness every morning. "Time for summer camp." I'd drag myself out of bed, pretending to be excited about another day of crafts and organized fun while my mind was miles away, wondering what the hell Mom was doing on the other side of the world. Weekends with Rachel were better. We'd go to the zoo or the beach, and for a few hours, I could almost forget the mess my life had become. But then I'd catch her looking at me with pity in her eyes, and reality would come crashing back. When Mom finally came back, it was like she was a whole new person. Her eyes were bright, her smile wide, and she couldn't stop talking about positive thinking and manifesting wealth. "Monica, sweetie, our lives are about to change," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelled of incense and something else I couldn't quite place. "I've unlocked my true potential. You'll see." It started small. A lottery ticket here, a scratch card there. Mom would come home giddy with excitement over a $20 win, treating me to pizza and new clothes like we were millionaires. "See, Monica? The universe is rewarding us," she'd say, waving the ticket in the air like it was made of gold. I should have known it was too good to be true. Soon, the small bets weren't enough. That's when the casino trip started. The first time she went, she came home at dawn, reeking of cigarettes and cheap perfume, but grinning from ear to ear. "I won $500, she exclaimed, throwing a wad of cash on the kitchen table. "This is just the beginning, honey. Soon, we'll be living in a mansion." I forced a smile, but my stomach was in knots. Something told me this wasn't going to end well. As the weeks went by, Mom's trips to the casino became more frequent. Sometimes she'd win, coming home in a whirlwind of manic energy, talking a mile a minute about her system and how she'd cracked the code. But more often, she'd slink in quietly, her eyes red and puffy, smelling of booze and defeat. The good days were getting rarer, and the bad days, well, they were getting a lot worse. One weekend, Mom disappeared for 2 whole days. She left me with a stack of frozen dinners and a stern warning. "Remember, Monica, this is our little secret," she said, her eyes hard. "If anyone asks, I'm not feeling well and I'm resting in my room. Got it?" When she finally came home Sunday night, she looked like hell. Her clothes were rumpled, her hair a mess, and she couldn't even look me in the eye. "Mommy just had a bit of bad luck. But don't worry, it'll turn around soon. I can feel it." But it didn't turn around. The trips got longer, the losses bigger. I started dreading the sound of her key in the lock in the early hours of the morning. A quiet entry meant a good night at the tables. A slam meant losses, and those were happening more and more often. Grandma Elizabeth was like a breath of fresh air in the suffocating mess my life had become. She lived in the next state over, but she made a point of visiting every few months. Those visits became my lifeline, a glimpse of normalcy in the chaos. But they were also incredibly stressful. The minute we got word that Grandma was coming, Mom would go into full-on panic mode. "Monica," she'd yell, already pulling out cleaning supplies. "We need to get this place in shape. Your grandmother can't see it like this." And so began the frenzied cleaning sprees. We'd spend days scrubbing, dusting, and hiding evidence of Mom's hobby. Dirty dishes that had been piling up for weeks suddenly vanished. The overflowing ashtrays were emptied, and the lingering smell of stale smoke was masked with air freshener. But the worst part wasn't the cleaning, but the lying. "Now remember," Mom would coach me, her eyes hard and serious, "everything's great. I'm doing well at work, and we're very happy. Got it?" When Grandma Elizabeth would finally arrive, I'd plaster on a fake smile and pretend everything was just peachy. But inside, I was screaming. I wanted so badly to tell her the truth, to beg her to take me away from all this. But I couldn't. I couldn't betray Mom like that. Grandma Elizabeth didn't know that the money she kept sending us, money meant for my care and education, was going straight into the casinos. Mom would cash the checks and be out the door before the ink was dry, chasing that elusive big win that would solve all our problems. As I got older, it became harder to ignore the reality of our situation. There were days when the fridge stood empty, and I'd have to ration my school lunches to make them last through dinner. On my 12th birthday, Grandma Elizabeth made a gesture that would change everything. She came to visit, bringing with her a shiny new smartphone, the kind all the cool kids at school had. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she said, handing me the gift-wrapped box. "Linda, I've got something for you too. I've opened a college fund for Monica. It's in your name since she's still a minor, but it's for her future. Just promise me you'll use it wisely." Mom nodded, tears in her eyes. "I swear, Elizabeth. I'll never touch that money for anything else. Monica's future means everything to me." As I hugged my grandmother goodbye later that day, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was the turning point. Maybe now, with my future secure, Mom would finally get the help she needed. At first everything was fine. Mom started going to Gamblers Anonymous meetings, picked up some real estate clients again. I threw myself into my studies, daring to dream about college and a future free from the chaos of the past few years. But like all the times before, Mom's resolve didn't last. Within months, she was back to her old habits. The excuses started small. "I'm just too tired for the meeting tonight, honey. I'll go next week." But next week never came. Soon, she was disappearing for days at a time again, leaving me to fend for myself. I was 13 now, and I'd become scarily good at being the adult in our household. I could forge Mom's signature perfectly on school documents, a skill born from necessity rather than rebellion. I even taught myself to cook, whipping up simple meals from whatever I could scrounge up in our perpetually bare pantry. Anything to keep my stomach from growling during class. As I entered high school, I withdrew more and more. Making friends felt impossible. How could I invite anyone over when I never knew what state the house, or mom, would be in? The few times I tried to open up, I was met with blank stares or awkward silence. No one could understand what my life was really like. By 16, I was desperate for some control over my life. That's when I decided to get a job. The local coffee shop was hiring, and to my surprise, the manager hired me on the spot. That coffee shop became my sanctuary. For a few hours each day, I could pretend to be normal. Just another teen working her first job, not the daughter of a gambling addict, barely keeping her head above water. And the money, well, it wasn't much, but it was mine. But reality has a way of shattering even the most carefully constructed illusions. One night, after a late shift at the coffee shop, I came home to find the front door unlocked. Alarm bells went off in my head immediately. Mom might be irresponsible, but she always locked the door. The house was a disaster. Clothes strewn everywhere, dishes piled in the sink, and in smell I couldn't quite place hanging in the air. Then I heard it, muffled sobs coming from the living room. I found Mom sprawled on the floor, an empty wine bottle clutched to her chest like a lifeline. She was on the phone, her words slurred and barely coherent. "I've lost everything," she was saying, her voice breaking. "Just one more chance. I know I can turn it around with one big win." My blood ran cold. I knew, with a certainty that made me sick to my stomach, what she was talking about. I waited until Mom passed out, snoring on the living room floor, before I made my move. With shaking hands, I opened her laptop. It took me a few tries to find the right banking app and guess the password. But when I did, the truth hit me like a punch to the gut. The account was empty. Completely drained. Years of saving, Grandma's generous gift, my entire future, gone. I stormed into the living room where Mom was still passed out. I shook her awake, my hands trembling with rage. "Mom, wake up. We need to talk about the money." She blinked at me, confusion and pain etched across her face. "What? Monica, what are you talking about?" "The college fund, Mom. The one Grandma set up for me. The one you swore you'd never touch. It's gone." For a moment, she just stared at me. Then she tried to deny it, her voice weak and unconvincing. No, you must be mistaken. I would never." But as I laid out the evidence, the empty account, the late-night phone call I'd overheard, her denials crumbled. In their place came the accusations. "You ungrateful brat," she screamed, her face contorted with rage and shame. "After everything I've done for you, this is how you repay me? Snooping through my private information?" It was like a dam had burst. Years of resentment, fear, and disappointment came pouring out of both of us. We screamed and cried, hurling bitter words at each other like weapons. And then it happened. In a moment of blind fury, Mom's hand lashed out, catching me across the face. The force of the blow knocked me back, and I felt a sharp sting where her ring had cut my cheek. I raised a hand to my throbbing cheek, feeling the warm trickle of blood. Without a word, I turned and fled to my room, locking the door behind me. I slid down to the floor, my back against the door, and finally let the tears come. That night, I made a decision. I couldn't stay here anymore. I packed a backpack with some clothes and the little money I'd saved from my coffee shop job. As the first light of dawn crept through my window, I slipped out of the house without a backwards glance. When I showed up on Dad's doorstep, his reaction was lukewarm at best. He invited me in awkwardly, shooting apologetic glances at Caroline, his wife, who didn't even try to hide her annoyance at my presence. I poured out the whole story: Mom's gambling, the empty college fund, the fight. I watched Dad's face change from shock to anger and finally to a resigned weariness that made my heart sink. I spent that night in their guest room, feeling like an intruder in what should have been my second home. As I lay there, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, I realized I'd been foolish to hope for rescue. My suspicions were confirmed the next evening when I overheard Dad on the phone with Mom. You need to come get her, Linda, he hissed, his voice low but clear through the thin walls. This isn't my problem. I've been paying child support for years, that should have been more than enough to cover her education. I crept back to the guest room, my heart heavy with the final death of a hope I hadn't even realized I'd been clinging to. As I sat on the edge of the bed, I knew one thing for certain: I couldn't stay here. The next morning, I sat on the bus, my backpack clutched to my chest, watching the miles tick by. I was headed to Grandma Elizabeth's house in the next state over. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had left. My stomach churned with anxiety. What if Grandma turned me away too? What if Mom had already gotten to her with lies and excuses? I'd been let down so many times before, I wasn't sure I could handle another rejection. When I finally arrived at Grandma Elizabeth's house, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. I stood on her porch for what felt like hours, trying to work up the courage to knock. But I needn't have worried. The moment Grandma opened the door and saw me standing there, her face went from shocked to concerned to fiercely protective in the span of seconds. "Monica, sweetheart, what are you doing here? Are you all right?" Before I knew it, I was wrapped in her arms, sobbing out the whole miserable story. The gambling, the lies, the empty college fund, the fight with Mom, Dad's rejection, all of it came pouring out in a flood of tears and broken words. Grandma listened to it all, her face growing stormier with each revelation. When I finally finished, she cupped my face in her hands, her eyes blazing with determination. "You're safe now, honey," she said, her voice firm and reassuring. "We're going to fix this. Together." Grandma Elizabeth wasted no time. She called her friend who was a lawyer, discussing terms like paternal rights and gambling that made my head spin. But mostly, she was preparing for the confrontation I knew was coming. When Mom finally arrived, summoned by Grandma's demands, I almost didn't recognize her. She looked small and defeated, nothing like the towering figure of my childhood. But the moment she opened her mouth, I realized some things hadn't changed at all. "Elizabeth, thank goodness you called," Mom said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I've been so worried about Monica. She's been acting out, telling wild stories. I just don't know what to do with her anymore. I've tried my best, but she's been so difficult, so ungrateful." But Grandma Elizabeth wasn't buying it. Without a word, she opened her laptop and pulled up the bank statements showing the now empty college fund. "Would you care to explain this, Linda?" Grandma asked, her voice ice cold. The color drained from Mom's face as she stared at the screen. Her mouth opened and closed a few times, but no sound came out. It was like watching a balloon deflate. "I can explain," she finally stammered. "Things have been tough, and I just needed to borrow a little. I was going to pay it back." But her excuses were weak, and she knew it. I could see the panic in her eyes as she realized she wasn't going to be able to lie her way out of this one. And then, in a last desperate attempt to regain control, Mom's face hardened. "You know what? I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm Monica's mother. That money was in my name. I had every right to spend it how I saw fit." Grandma Elizabeth's eyes flashed with a fierce determination I'd never seen before. She leaned forward, her voice low and dangerous. "You're right about one thing, Linda. There's no legal document stating that money was exclusively for Monica's education. It was a trust placed in you, which you betrayed. But let me be clear about what I can do." Mom's smug expression faltered as Grandma continued. "That house you've been living in? The one you've neglected for years? I bought that as an investment property. And I'm selling it. Immediately." Mom's face went pale. "You can't do that. Where will we live?" "We?" Grandma raised an eyebrow. "There is no we, Linda. The proceeds from the sale will go towards Monica's education and setting her up with a small apartment near her chosen college." I felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by fear as I saw Mom's face contort with rage. But Grandma wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I'm suing for custody of Monica. Your gambling addiction, financial abuse, and that little physical altercation you had? All grounds for termination of parental rights." The room fell silent. I held my breath, watching Mom's face as the reality of her situation sank in. For the first time, I saw real fear in her eyes. What followed was a whirlwind of legal activity. Mom, faced with losing everything, fought back hard at first. She hired this slick lawyer who tried to paint me as some troubled teen and Grandma as a meddling old woman. But the evidence against Mom was overwhelming. My teachers came forward, talking about how my grades had slipped, how I'd sometimes come to school looking exhausted or hungry. My manager from the coffee shop testified about my work ethic, how I'd sometimes beg for extra shifts even when I was dead on my feet. With each testimony, I watched Mom shrink a little more in her seat. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Mom's sponsor from Gamblers Anonymous broke the code of anonymity to testify. She stood up in court and laid it all out: Mom's severe addiction, her repeated relapses, her refusal to truly engage with the program. That was the moment Mom finally broke. As the sponsor spoke, I saw something crumble in Mom's eyes. When she took the stand, gone was the defiant, lying woman I'd known for years. In her place was someone small, broken, and finally, honest. "I have a problem," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I've hurt my daughter. I've betrayed her trust. I've ruined everything." As I watched my mother break down on the stand, confessing to years of addiction and neglect, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Part of me was relieved to finally hear her admit the truth. Part of me was angry that it had taken this long, that it had to come to this. And part of me, a part one wasn't proud of, felt a grim satisfaction seeing her finally face the consequences of her actions. But mostly, I felt tired. So incredibly, bone-deep tired. As Mom's sobs echoed through the courtroom, I closed my eyes, hoping that somehow, some way, this nightmare was finally coming to an end. The judge's gavel came down with a finality that echoed through the courtroom. In the matter of custody for Monica Thompson, the court rules in favor of Elizabeth Thompson. Linda Thompson's parental rights are hereby terminated. Dad was given a chance to step up, to fight for custody, but he didn't even show up to the hearing. His lawyer simply stated that Mark Thompson would not be contesting Elizabeth's guardianship. Just like that, both my parents had washed their hands of me. True to her word, Grandma Elizabeth sold Mom's house. She combined the proceeds with her own savings to set up a new trust fund for my education. This time, it was ironclad: the money could only be used for tuition, books, and other school-related expenses. No one, not even Elizabeth herself, could touch it for anything else. As my high school graduation approached, Grandma and I spent our weekends getting ready for my next big step. She'd bought me a small apartment near the college I'd chosen, and we had fun picking out furniture and decorating it. As we worked, we talked about my plans for the future. I'd decided to major in social work, with a minor in psychology. After everything I'd been through, I wanted to help other kids who were struggling. But even as I settled into my new life, I couldn't shake the conflicting emotions that churned inside me. I was relieved to finally have stability, to know where my next meal was coming from and not have to worry about keeping the lights on. But I also felt guilty. What would happen to Mom now? And as much as I tried to push it down, I was angry. Angry at Mom for her addiction, at Dad for his indifference, at both of them for failing me so completely. Grandma, perceptive as always, noticed my struggle. "Honey," she said gently one day, "I think it might be good for you to talk to someone. A professional, I mean. Someone who can help you process everything that's happened." It wasn't easy. Dredging up old memories, confronting feelings I'd tried so hard to bury, some days I left my sessions feeling wrung out and raw. But slowly, I started to heal. I learned that it was okay to be angry, to be sad, to grieve for the childhood I never had. I learned that my parents' failures weren't my fault, and that I didn't owe them my forgiveness until I was ready to give it, if ever. As I packed up my things, ready to move into my new apartment and start my college journey, I made a difficult decision. I wasn't going to reach out to Mom or Dad. Not yet, maybe not for a long time. I needed to focus on myself, on building the life I wanted, free from their chaos and disappointment. As we drove towards my new apartment, towards my new life, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, I knew that. There would be tough days, days when the old pain and anger would resurface. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt hope. Real, genuine hope for my future. I was Monica Thompson. I was a survivor. And now, finally, I had the chance to become so much more.
Lucas was supposed to handle months ago. You had no right to look at our private banking information. Mom's face flushed red. Someone had to. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. He's taking advantage of you both, and you're letting him. Your brother is building something important, Mom snapped. Sometimes businesses need capital. His last 3 businesses failed, Mom. The gym, the protein shake company, the sports app. Where did all that investment money go? Dad cleared his throat. Hope, maybe this isn't the time. When is the time, Dad? When they're broke. When Lucas has drained their retirement fund. That's enough. Mom slammed her hand on the counter. I won't sit here and listen to you attack your brother out of jealousy. The word hit like a slap. Jealousy. Their eternal explanation for any criticism I ever had of Lucas. Fine. I pulled out my phone and pulled up the banking app. Let me show you exactly what your precious son has been doing with your money. Mom turned away. I don't need to see anything. I trust Lucas. That's the problem. I looked at Dad, pleading, you have to see this. Please. He met my eyes for a moment, then looked away. Your mother's right, Hope. Lucas wouldn't. Unbelievable. I grabbed my purse. You know what? Keep burying your heads in the sand. But don't come crying to me when you're working at Walmart in your 70s because your retirement fund mysteriously disappeared. I stormed out, slamming the door behind me. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel, my knuckles white. My phone buzzed, a text from Lucas. Stay out of my business, little sister. You have no idea what you're getting into. I stared at the message, a cold smile spreading across my face. Oh, brother dear, you have no idea what I'm capable of. This isn't about jealousy anymore. This is about justice. And I'm just getting started. Nina's apartment always smelled like lavender and coffee, a combination that usually calmed my nerves. Not tonight. I paced her living room, clutching my phone with Lucas's threatening text still displayed. He's really done it this time, Nina said, curled up on her couch. Have you talked to Ella? Lucas's perfect wife? She probably helped him plan it. I stopped pacing, remembering something. Although what? Last month at Tommy's birthday party, she seemed off. Kept checking her phone, barely touched her food. When Lucas started bragging about his new business venture, she practically flinched. Nina leaned forward. You think she knows? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Dad's name flashed on the screen. I answered on speaker. Hope, your mother and I discussed it, and we're having a family dinner tomorrow night. Lucas will be there. We need to clear the air. My stomach clenched. Clear the air? Or gang up on me? That's not fair. His voice carried that familiar note of defeat. We're trying to keep this family together. By letting Lucas steal from you? It's not stealing when we agreed to help him. Mom's voice cut in. She'd been listening the whole time. You're coming to dinner. 7 o'clock sharp. The line went dead. Nina raised an eyebrow. Perfect, I said, a plan forming. I'll bring proof. The next evening, I arrived at my parents' house armed with bank statements and screenshots. Lucas's car already occupied the driveway, his precious Mercedes that probably cost another chunk of our parents' savings. Inside, the tension was thick enough to choke on. Mom busied herself in the kitchen, Dad helped set the table, and Lucas sat in his usual spot, looking smug. Ella stood by the window, bouncing their son Tommy on her hip. Hope, Lucas said, his smile not reaching his eyes. Good to see you're still concerned about my finances. Someone has to be. I dropped my bag beside my chair. Since you're clearly not. Children, Mom warned from the kitchen. Not in front of Tommy. Ella suddenly spoke up. I should put him to bed upstairs. It's past his bedtime anyway. As she passed me, her eyes met mine for a split second. Something in her expression made me pause. Fear? So, Lucas said once Ella was gone. Let's hear it. What horrible accusations are you bringing to dinner? I pulled out the bank statements. These transfers, for starters. $50,000 in 2 weeks? That's just the beginning, isn't it? I told Mom and Dad about those transfers. He leaned back, relaxed. They're investments in my new tech startup. Everything's properly documented. Really? I slid another paper across the table. Because I called the bank. That account number you transferred to? It's a personal account in the Cayman Islands. The color drained from Lucas's face. Mom set down a casserole dish with enough force to rattle the plates. Hope, that's enough. How dare you investigate your brother like some kind of criminal? Because he is one. I stood up, hands shaking. He's not investing anything. He's stealing their retirement money and hiding it offshore. And I bet Ella has no idea. Leave my wife out of this, Lucas snarled, standing too. Why? Afraid she'll find out where the money's really going. A crash from upstairs made us all freeze. Ella appeared at the top of the stairs, white-faced. Tommy's fine, he just knocked over a lamp, but she held up her phone. Lucas, why is there an email about plane tickets to Buenos Aires? The silence that followed was deafening. Lucas's face transformed from anger to something I'd never seen before, pure panic. Ella, honey, I can explain. Explain what? I cut in. How you're planning to disappear with our parents' money. Dad finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. Lucas, tell me this isn't true. But Lucas was already backing toward the door, his mask completely shattered. You don't understand. None of you understand what it's like trying to live up to everyone's expectations. I just needed a fresh start. With stolen money? Ella's voice cracked. Were you going to tell me about Argentina, or just disappear with our son? Mom sank into a chair, her world visibly crumbling. And in that moment, watching my perfect brother's life implode, I felt no satisfaction, only a hollow ache for what our family had become. Lucas bolted for the door. But this time, running away wouldn't save him. I had more evidence, and now I had something even more valuable, Ella's attention. The real war was just beginning. Grandpa Henry's bookstore always smelled like old paper and pipe tobacco, even though he'd quit smoking years ago. I found him in his usual spot, perched on a wooden stool behind the counter, examining an ancient ledger through his reading glasses. I need your help, I said, dropping a thick manila folder on the counter. He looked up, eyes sharp despite his age. This about Lucas? You knew. I've watched that boy take advantage of this family for years. He closed his ledger. Your grandmother would have seen right through him. She always said Lucas had your Uncle Richard's eyes, beautiful but dangerous. I spread out the documents I'd gathered. Bank statements, failed business records, loan applications. A pattern emerged, each venture more desperate than the last. Look at this. I pointed to a document. He took out a second mortgage on his house without telling Ella. And here, he's been lying about his company's revenue to get more loans. Grandpa Henry studied the papers, his expression darkening. There's more, isn't there? I hired a private investigator. I pulled out another document. Lucas has gambling debts. Big ones. The kind that attract dangerous people. The bell above the door chimed. Ella walked in, Tommy balanced on her hip. Her eyes were red-rimmed. I thought I'd find you here, she said. Lucas came home last night. He's saying you fabricated everything. Did he explain the plane tickets? She shifted Tommy to her other hip. He says it was a business trip he was planning. That you're twisting everything because you're jealous. Jealous. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my ears. Show her, Grandpa. He handed Ella the mortgage document. Her hands trembled as she read it. This can't be right, she whispered. We agreed no major financial decisions without consulting each other. There's more. I hesitated, then pulled out the gambling records. He owes people money, Ella. Dangerous people. The color drained from her face. How much? Over 200,000. Tommy started fussing. Grandpa Henry quickly produced a cookie from behind the counter. He'd always kept treats for young visitors. I should have seen it, Ella said, watching Tommy nibble the cookie. The late-night phone calls. The way he'd jump whenever his phone buzzed. Last week, I found him in our home office at 3 a.m, shredding documents. The bell chimed again. My mother burst in, face flushed with anger. Hope, what have you done? She demanded. Lucas is talking about leaving town because of your accusations. He says you're trying to destroy him. Karen, Grandpa Henry's voice carried a warning. Before you defend your son, you might want to see these. I don't need to see anything. You've always taken Hope's side. Mom. Ella's voice cut through the tension. Look at the documents. Please. For Tommy's sake. Something in Ella's tone made Mom pause. She took the papers with obvious reluctance. As she read, her hands began to shake. This must be a mistake. Lucas wouldn't. He already has, I said quietly. And if we don't stop him, he's going to drag this whole family down with him. The sound of screeching tires outside made us all jump. Through the store's front window, I saw Lucas's Mercedes pull up sharply. He followed me, Ella whispered, clutching Tommy closer. Lucas burst through the door, his usual polished appearance disheveled. His eyes landed on the documents spread across the counter. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? He snarled at me. Had to play detective, had to ruin everything. You ruined it yourself, Grandpa Henry stood, his voice stern. Now step back from my granddaughter. Lucas's phone buzzed. He checked it, and for a moment, raw fear flashed across his face. You don't understand, he said, his voice cracking. These people, they want their money by midnight. All of it. If I don't pay, then what? I challenged. More theft? More lies? Or were you planning to run and leave Ella and Tommy to deal with your mess? The look in his eyes told me everything. My perfect brother, the golden child, was finally out of options. And for the first time in our lives, I held all the cards. The lawyer's office felt too small for the weight of what I was about to do. Papers scattered across his desk, affidavits, bank records, and a restraining order application that made my stomach turn. Once we file these, Mr. Patterson said, tapping the documents, there's no going back. Your brother could face serious charges. My phone buzzed again, the 15th call from Mom in 2 hours. I silenced it without looking. What about my parents' money? We can freeze the accounts immediately, but he hesitated. There's something else you should see. He slid a document across the desk. A deed transfer, dated 3 days ago. My parents' house, their home of 30 years, now belonged to one of Lucas's shell companies. The room tilted sideways. They don't know, do they? Based on these signatures. He adjusted his glasses. I'm almost certain they're forged. A knock at the door made us both jump. Dad stood there, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Hope. His voice cracked. We need to talk. Mr. Patterson gathered the papers. I'll give you two a moment. Once we were alone, Dad collapsed into the vacant chair. Your mother doesn't know I'm here. Did Lucas tell you about the house? His blank expression answered my question. Why are you here, Dad? He pulled out an old envelope, yellowed with age. I found this in your grandmother's things after she died. She made me promise to keep it safe. His hands shook as he opened it. It's about Lucas. Inside was a DNA test from 28 years ago. My heart stopped as I read the results. Lucas isn't yours? Your mother had an affair with Richard, my brother. The star athlete, the golden boy. He laughed bitterly. I've spent 28 years trying to love a son who reminded me every day of my brother's betrayal. Does Lucas know? No, but I think he sensed it somehow. The way I could never quite. He trailed off, staring at his hands. Why tell me now? Because I'm done protecting other people's lies. He straightened up. I want to sign whatever papers you need. It's time someone in this family stood up for what's right. My phone buzzed again, this time a text from Ella. Lucas is gone. Took everything from our accounts. Police are here. Before I could respond, another text came through, this one from Lucas himself. You want to play hardball, little sister? Fine. Tell Mom and Dad to check their retirement accounts. All of them. My hands trembled as I pulled up the banking app. Every account, empty. He's cleaned them out, I whispered. Everything. Dad's face hardened. Call your lawyer back in. Wait. I stared at Lucas's text. Something felt off. He's trying to scare us into backing down. But why now? I dialed Nina. Remember that background check you ran on Lucas's new business partner? The one who doesn't exist? Yeah, why? I need you to check something else. Look for any recent property purchases under his name. I heard keyboard clicks, then a sharp intake of breath. Hope, he bought a plane ticket. Private charter. Tonight. Where to? Venezuela. No extradition treaty. Dad was already on his feet. I'm calling the police. No. I grabbed his arm. If we spook him now, he'll run immediately. We need to play this smart. I turned back to the lawyer's documents. How quickly can we freeze everything? With your father's signature? Within the hour. I met Dad's eyes. Are you sure about this? Mom will never forgive you. Your mother's forgiveness stopped mattering the moment she chose Lucas's lies over our family's future. He picked up the pen. Do it. As he signed the papers, I felt the weight of 24 years of being the overlooked child, the second best, the afterthought. But now, watching my father finally choose truth over comfort, I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about justice. And sometimes justice means burning everything down to save what matters most. I pulled out my phone and dialed one last number. Ella? Get Tommy and pack a bag. I know where Lucas is going, and I need your help to stop him. The private airfield sprawled before us, dark except for the runway lights cutting through the fog. Ella clutched Tommy to her chest in the passenger seat while Nina worked her laptop in the back. His flight's scheduled for midnight, Nina said. We have 40 minutes. My phone lit up with Mom's face. After 3 days of silence, she was calling now. I answered on speaker. Where are you? Her voice cracked. Lucas just called. He's saying terrible things about your father, about some DNA test. Is it true? I kept my eyes on the airfield's entrance. About Uncle Richard? The silence stretched too long. We need to talk about this as a family. Like we talked about Lucas stealing your retirement? Or forging your signatures? Or, he's your brother. No. The word felt like glass in my throat. Apparently he's not. A security guard approached our car. I flashed Ella's ID. She'd called ahead, playing the dutiful wife one last time. You don't understand, Mom continued. Lucas is in trouble. Real trouble. There are men looking for him. Dangerous people. I know about the gambling debts. No, it's worse. Her voice dropped. They're saying he laundered money for them. If he doesn't deliver tonight. Headlights swept across the parking lot. A black SUV pulled up near the private hangar. I have to go. I hung up as 2 men in dark suits emerged from the SUV. They didn't move like businessmen. Those aren't debt collectors, Nina whispered. Hope, what are we doing here? My phone buzzed with a text from Lucas. If you're here to stop me, don't. These people will kill me if I don't deliver. Take Tommy, Ella said suddenly, passing her son to Nina. I'm going to talk to him. Ella, wait. But she was already out of the car, walking toward the hangar. I followed, my heart hammering. Lucas stepped out of the shadows, looking haunted. The men in suits tensed. It's just my wife, Lucas called to them. And my sister. 10 minutes, one man growled. Then we leave with or without the money. Ella reached Lucas first. You were going to leave us? I was going to send for you. His eyes darted between us. Once I figured things out. You mean once you laundered their money? I stepped closer. That's what this is about, isn't it? Your new business partner, he's with them. I didn't have a choice. They threatened Tommy. Don't you dare, Ella hissed. Don't use our son to justify this. A car door slammed behind us. Dad emerged from the darkness, followed by Grandpa Henry. Hope texted me your location, Grandpa said, his voice steel. Did you really think we'd let you run? Lucas backed away. You don't understand. If I don't get on that plane, then what? Dad stepped forward. More lies? More theft? When does it end, Lucas? When I'm dead? Lucas laughed a hollow sound. Is that what you want? Dad? Or should I even call you that? The suited men moved closer. Time's up. Wait. I pulled out my phone, opened a banking app. I can transfer the money. Right now. Everyone froze. Hope, don't, Dad warned. It's my trust fund. I met Lucas's eyes. The one Grandma left me. The one you couldn't touch. Why would you? Lucas started. Because I'm giving you a choice. My finger hovered over the transfer button. Take the money, get on that plane. But if you do, you never contact this family again. You never threaten Ella or Tommy. You disappear completely. Or stay. Face what you've done. Let us help you the right way, with lawyers, with protection. But no more lies. The suited men shifted impatiently. Lucas looked at Ella, at Tommy in the car, then at the plane waiting in the darkness. Time to choose, brother. I held up my phone. Who are you really running from? The fog thickened around us as Lucas stared at the screen, his face reflecting the harsh glow of numbers that could buy his freedom or seal his fate. The police station's fluorescent lights made everything look sickly and unreal. I sat in the hard plastic chair, watching through one-way glass as Lucas talked to the detectives. Mom paced behind me, while Dad and Grandpa Henry sat silently in the corner. He's going to prison, Mom whispered. My baby is going to prison, and it's your fault. I didn't respond. My trust fund was gone, transferred to an account that would help Lucas make restitution. The money that was supposed to be my fresh start, my escape, now belonged to his victims. Detective Martinez stepped out of the interrogation room. Your brother's naming names. Big ones. The kind that make people disappear. So what happens now? Dad asked. Witness protection, probably. For all of you. Mom collapsed into a chair. All of us. These people he worked with, they don't leave loose ends. Martinez's face hardened. They've already made threats against Tommy. Ella burst through the door, face streaked with tears. They took him. They took my baby. The room exploded into chaos. Martinez barked orders into his radio while Mom screamed and Dad tried to calm Ella down. When I grabbed Ella's shoulders. Where? The babysitter. She said 2 men came with papers, said they were from Child Services. Ella's voice cracked. I called the agency. They never sent anyone. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Your brother's testimony for the kid. 1 hour. Come alone. I showed Martinez the text. He shook his head. We can't let you. It's my nephew. I stood up. And my mess to fix. Hope, Grandpa Henry caught my arm. This isn't your fault. But it was. I'd pushed Lucas into a corner, forced his hand. In my quest for justice, I'd put a child in danger. I have a plan. I looked at Martinez. But I need your help. 40 minutes later, I stood in the empty parking garage from the text, my heart thundering against my ribs. A black car pulled up, its windows tinted. A man stepped out, the same suit from the airfield. Where's Lucas? Where's Tommy? He nodded to the car. The back window lowered slightly, enough to see Tommy's sleeping face. Sedated, the man said. He'll wake up fine if you deliver. I need proof he's really okay. You're not calling the shots here. No. I pulled out my phone. Then I'll tell the FBI task force that's watching us right now to move in. Your choice. The man's face tightened. He opened the car door, revealing Tommy strapped into a car seat. I stepped forward, checking his breathing. Steady. Relief flooded through me. Happy? Now, where's Lucas? I straightened up. He's not coming. The man's gun appeared so fast I barely saw him move. That wasn't the deal. No, but this is. I held up my phone, showing him the live stream that had been running since I arrived. Say hi to your followers. All 100,000 of them. His eyes widened as he saw the viewer count climbing. Amazing what a viral post about kidnapping can do. #SaveTommy is trending. I took another step forward. The whole city is watching. Police are probably already on their way. So here's my counteroffer. Leave Tommy, walk away, and this video doesn't include your face. You stupid bit. Police sirens wailed in the distance. The man's head snapped toward the sound. Tick-tock, I said. He backed toward his car. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Because if anything happens to my family, any of them, this video shows exactly who to blame. He peeled out of the garage just as police cars swarmed the entrance. I grabbed Tommy from the car seat, holding him close as Martinez's team surrounded us. Targets fleeing north, Martinez barked into his radio. You okay? I nodded, watching Mom and Ella run toward us. But over their shoulders, I caught Lucas's eyes through the window of a police car. His face showed something I'd never seen before, respect. But it didn't matter anymore. I'd won, but the victory felt hollow. My family was fractured, possibly beyond repair. And somewhere in the city, dangerous men were plotting revenge. The war wasn't over. It was just changing battlefields. The safe house felt like a cage. 3 weeks of protective custody had worn us all down. Mom barely spoke, Dad buried himself in paperwork, and Ella spent hours staring out windows, Tommy clutched to her chest. Martinez arrived at sunset, his face grim. We found them. The whole operation. But what? He handed me a phone. Lucas wants to talk to you. Only you. I stepped onto the back porch, away from the family's prying eyes. What do you want? They're going to kill me. Lucas's voice shook. The FBI raid missed some people. Important people. They think I'm the leak. Aren't you? Not the original one. He paused. Hope, I need to show you something. Something that changes everything. No meetings, Martinez said. It's about Dad. And Uncle Richard. And why Mom always protected me. His voice dropped. There's so much you don't know. The line went dead. A text followed with an address, the old high school football field where Lucas had been king. Martinez caught me at the door. You're not going. I showed him the text. You can watch from a distance. But he'll only talk to me. It's a trap. Probably. I grabbed my keys. But I need to know the truth. The football field was dark except for one set of lights illuminating the 50-yard line. Lucas stood there, looking small against the empty bleachers. I'm here, I called out. Talk. He turned, holding a manila envelope. Did you ever wonder why Mom couldn't let me fail? Why she pushed so hard? Because you were her golden boy. Because I was her shame. He pulled out old letters. Richard wasn't just Dad's brother. He was Mom's first love. The star athlete she was supposed to marry. Until his accident. Until she got pregnant with me. The accident happened after, when Richard found out she'd chosen Dad instead. My head spun. Why are you telling me this now? Because Mom's not just protecting me. She's protecting herself. Her guilt, her choices. He laughed bitterly. I was never supposed to be the good son. I was her penance. Movement in the shadows caught my eye. Men in dark clothes, moving closer. You brought them here. They followed me. His hands trembled. I'm sorry, Hope. They said they'd kill Ella and Tommy if I didn't. Bring the other leak? A new voice cut through the darkness. The man from the parking garage stepped into the light. We've been watching you, Hope. Your little live stream stunt cost us millions. More men emerged, forming a circle around us. Martinez and his team were nowhere in sight. You know what's funny? The man continued. Lucas here wasn't the leak. Your mother was. Lucas's head snapped up. What? Karen's been feeding information to the FBI for months. Trying to save her precious son. He raised his gun. Too bad she was too late. You're lying, Lucas whispered. Ask her yourself. Oh wait. The man smiled. You won't get the chance. Time slowed. I saw his finger tighten on the trigger. Saw Lucas step forward, maybe to run, maybe to fight. Then the night exploded with light and sound. FBI, don't move. Spotlights flooded the field. Agents rappelled from the bleachers. Martinez's voice boomed through a megaphone. I dove for Lucas as gunfire erupted. We hit the turf hard. Mom really was trying to save you, I gasped. All this time. Lucas gripped my arm, eyes wide. Hope More shots. A bullet kicked up grass near our heads. Shut up and crawl, I hissed, pulling him toward the sideline. As we reached safety behind a SWAT van, Lucas looked at me differently, not with his usual condescension or recent fear, but with something like awe. You knew they'd follow me, he said. You used me as bait. I learned from the best. I checked him for wounds. Ready to tell the whole truth now? He nodded slowly, watching as agents led the captured men away. Think Mom will ever forgive us? Maybe. I helped him up. But first, we have to forgive her. Grandpa Henry's bookstore smelled different now, fresh paint mixed with the familiar scent of old paper. I straightened the grand reopening banner while he arranged books in the newly restored shelves. Your grandmother would have loved this, he said, adjusting his glasses. Using your settlement money to save her store. Our store, I corrected. Besides, blood money should go to something good. The criminal case had ended with plea deals and asset seizures. The crime syndicate crumbled, its leaders scattered or imprisoned. Our family's share of the recovered funds came with strings attached to therapy, supervision, accountability. The bell chimed. Lucas stepped in, looking smaller in his court-mandated monitoring anklet. Need help with those boxes? I nodded toward the back room. As he passed, I caught Mom watching through the window, hesitating at the door. Dad stood behind her, his hand on her shoulder. They'll come in when they're ready, Grandpa Henry said softly. Lucas returned with a stack of books. Where do you want these? Fiction section. Under R for redemption. He almost smiled. Subtle. Learned from the best. I handed him another box. How's the counseling going? Better than prison. He shelved books carefully, methodically. Ella's thinking about letting me have supervised visits with Tommy. Good. Hope. He paused, a book half-shelved. I've been trying to figure out when it all went wrong. Not the money or the lies, but us. When did I stop being your brother and start being your enemy? Maybe when I stopped being your sister and became your competition. The bell chimed again. Mom finally stepped inside, Dad close behind. She looked around the restored store, tears in her eyes. Your grandmother's first edition collection, she whispered, touching the glass display case. You found them? In the attic, Grandpa Henry said. Where you hid them when the creditors came for Richard's debts. Mom's hand trembled. I was trying to protect everyone. By lying. Dad's voice was gentle but firm. Or by making Lucas into something he wasn't? Both. She turned to Lucas. I thought if I could make you perfect, it would erase my mistakes. Instead, I just repeated them. Lucas stepped toward her, then stopped, uncertain. I moved between them, taking Mom's hand and placing it in Lucas's. Perfect is overrated, I said. Try honest instead. The door chimed one last time. Nina walked in with Tommy, returning from their ice cream run. The toddler squealed at the sight of Lucas, but stayed by Nina's side, still cautious around his father. Hey, champ, Lucas said softly. Want to help me put some books away? Tommy looked at Nina, who nodded. He took a tentative step toward Lucas. I turned away, giving them space, and found Dad studying the old family photos on the wall, Mom and Uncle Richard as teenagers, Grandma and Grandpa on their wedding day, Lucas and me as kids. I should have protected you both, he said. From Karen's guilt, from Richard's shadow, from my own cowardice. We protect ourselves now. I straightened a crooked frame. And maybe each other when we can. Speaking of protection, Grandpa Henry called from the counter. These books won't shelve themselves. Family project? One by one, they moved toward the boxes, Mom and Dad, Lucas with Tommy trailing behind, Nina grabbing the lighter loads. We worked in comfortable silence, finding our rhythms, respecting our spaces. I watched them from the ladder as I stalked the top shelves. My family, broken and healing, learning to exist in the truth rather than perfect lies. The revenge I'd sought had transformed into something else, not forgiveness exactly, but understanding. The last book in my hand was Grandma's favorite, worn and dog-eared. Inside the cover, her handwriting, "The truth may hurt, but lies leave scars." I placed it carefully on the shelf, between the past we couldn't change and the future we'd have to build. Some stories end with perfect resolution, with all wounds healed and all sins forgiven. This wasn't one of them, but maybe that made it more true.
You didn't hear me. A high school grad like you must be hard of hearing too. My kids deserve to be born to a much better woman. Education doesn't matter when it comes to love. My husband used to say before we got married. Now he belittles me for only having a high school diploma, saying he's going to leave and remarry a woman with an elite college degree. Ah, what a tragedy to end up with a low-educated woman like you. I'm truly unlucky. With those bitter parting words, my husband eloped with a college-educated woman. My name is Abigail. I married James, who's 3 years older than me, at 25, and I'm turning 27 this year. I work as an administrative assistant at a trading company with only a high school diploma. We met through a mutual acquaintance from high school. My husband, unlike me, is an elite. He graduated from a prestigious university and works in sales for a big corporation. When we first met, I felt unworthy of his attention, but he kept saying, "Your degree doesn't matter. I like you for who you are." So I believed him and we got married. Unfortunately, it turns out that was a mistake. The moment we got married, he started looking down on me for my education and salary. From his perspective, a high school educated woman working at a small trading company must seem inferior, but he's the one who wanted to marry me. During our dating days, he sensed my insecurities and reassured me with kind words. That man is nowhere to be found now. You should really find a new job, Abigail. Having a wife who works for such a low-paying company is embarrassing, he shamelessly tells me. But I don't want to work for a demanding company right now because we're trying to conceive, and I also like my current job and company. His cold gaze silences me, my voice gradually shrinking. He sighs as if annoyed and retreats to the bedroom before I can say anything else. He probably assumed we were going to talk about our stagnant efforts to conceive again. He was right. I was hoping for a real discussion with my husband about our struggle to have a baby. From the beginning of our marriage, I always wanted kids, and my husband even optimistically talked about having 3 siblings. But all that was talk in the early days of our marriage, and the reality is that there is no baby in sight. I'd subtly hint at my husband to start thinking about having kids, but he avoided the conversation saying, "I don't want to raise a kid born to a high school graduate." His words left me stunned, and since then, we haven't really been able to talk face to face. Marriage had become a lonely affair. He'd belittle me every chance he got, reminding me to be grateful for being picked up by someone as elite as him, all while piling housework on me. And lately, he even stopped providing enough money for daily expenses. Apparently, according to him, I was bad with money and needed to save more. I had already cut corners wherever I could, even dipping into my savings from my single days when things got tough. You'd think I'd want a divorce by now, but fear held me back. The fear that he'd lash out if I brought it up. I was afraid to bring up divorce, worried that my husband would explode in anger. On top of that, I didn't want to betray my parents, who were so thrilled about our marriage and eagerly awaiting the birth of their first grandchild. As our marriage cooled off, my husband started spending less and less time at home. Coming home in the morning became the norm. If he came back drunk late at night, he'd wake me up to make him a snack. And whenever he came home late, I would always smell women's perfume on him. Even without a woman's intuition, it was clear he was cheating. But I was too scared to confront the truth and kept procrastinating. Then, out of the blue, he said he was leaving. "My real love is finally pregnant, and I'm moving in with her tomorrow." Stunned, I listened as he let out an exaggerated sigh. Didn't you hear me? You're a high school grad with bad ears too. My exceptional genes are wasted on you. He kept babbling about things I didn't even ask. Turns out, he was cheating on me with a younger woman who graduated from the same prestigious university as him. He said he was leaving me for her because she is now pregnant. She's just starting her career, you see. Taking maternity leave right after joining a company would affect her career. Since I'm such a catch, I've had plenty of matchmaking offerings from my bosses. So I thought, why not marry someone for the time being? That someone for the time being was apparently me. Maybe because there was no longer a need to hide. His face looked more grotesque than I had ever seen. You work for a small trading company, right? I thought you might have some useful connections or something. But no, you have no valuable contacts and all you do is nag about having kids. He stared at me intently after saying all this. Seeing me speechless, he snorted, stood up from the sofa, and muttered, "Ugh, what a tragedy. Marrying someone as uneducated as you. What a waste of my precious time." He then walked out the front door without even sparing me a glance. I take deep breaths as I hear my husband lock the front door. My tense muscles, tightened by his overbearing demeanor, finally start to relax, and I break out in a cold sweat. Now that I know his schemes, there's no need to hesitate. I quickly finish my dinner that day and lock myself in my bedroom before he gets home. The next morning, I leave for work early and pick up divorce papers on my way. My hands are trembling with nervousness. I manage to unlock the front door. His shoes are gone. Not just the shoes. His favorite slippers and the sofa he loved in the living room are gone too. I search the entire house, fearing the worst. Sure enough, all of his stuff is missing. I haven't seen him since he left yesterday. I spot a bundle of papers carelessly placed on the table along with a flimsy envelope. I flip through the note, written in his meticulous angular handwriting, to find a filled-out divorce application. The note says to never contact him again, that he's already told his parents. I emotionlessly fill in the blanks on the divorce papers. Not a tear shed. Once finished, I pick up the envelope marked settlement money next to it. It's light, but inside there's $2,000. It must be intended as alimony for the divorce settlement. Though it's a meager amount, it can serve as a retainer for a lawyer to seek proper alimony later. I was planning to visit a law firm on my day off when my phone buzzed. It was my apartment manager, letting me know I owed rent for the past 2 months. They had tried to reach my husband but ended up calling me. My savings, already drained from covering our expenses, wouldn't make a dent. So, I had no choice but to use the $2,000 in that envelope. At the law firm, they told me it would be tough to claim any more money. I had spent most of the cash my husband left on rent. Doing that, apparently, would make it look like I had accepted a divorce settlement. I had a responsibility for the rent too, as we shared a home. I figured my husband knew I was out of savings. He probably left that $2,000 as a way to wash his hands off me. And I had fallen right into his trap. I couldn't survive when most of my income went to rent, so I started working for cheaper places. Eventually, I returned to my parents' home after they learned of my divorce and urged me to come back. They insisted I was still young and encouraged me to find another partner, saying it wasn't too late to have kids. Returning home, my parents kept reminding me that I was still young, that I could find another person if I tried to date again, and that I was not too old to have children. I felt a sense of guilt for disappointing them with the divorce. While commuting to my job, now a bit far from home, I also started dating again. I packed my schedule faster than one might expect for someone who just got divorced, partly because keeping busy helped distract my mind. Perhaps I wanted to overwrite the nightmare of my previous marriage with a fulfilling daily life. My efforts paid off sooner than I had anticipated. Within 2 years after my divorce, I had remarried and given birth to a daughter. My new husband, Daniel, was the same age as me and also a high school graduate. After high school, he worked in an auto repair shop near my parents' house, and we met at a local singles mixer. Daniel was initially concerned about his educational level, but I assured him I wasn't like my ex, who judged people based on their credentials. Daniel, in turn, never looked down on me for my background. He was always generous and accepting. We built our new home close to my parents, and my days were filled with parenting and work. Life was busy, but happy. My thoughts of my ex-husband had long faded into oblivion. I unexpectedly ran into him about 10 years after our divorce. I was attending a Spanish speech and debate competition with my daughter.
"Is that you, Abigail?"
A man called out to me from behind. I turned around. Although he had aged, I immediately recognized the face, one I would rather not have seen. Next to my ex stood a young boy, about the same age as my daughter. Noticing my gaze, my ex-husband said with an unconcerned smile,
"This is my child with Abby. She's an elite too. Graduated from a national university. The kid has the potential, and we're investing a lot in gifted education."
Abby must be the college-educated woman he ran off with. He takes the liberty to brag about how smart his own child is, regardless of my feelings. As I quietly let it slide, he quickly glances at my daughter.
"So what about your husband? He's a high school grad too, isn't he? Knowing you?"
What he says is true, but admitting my current husband is also a high school graduate will likely make his insults worse. Wanting to avoid trouble, I neither confirm nor deny and quickly try to leave the scene with my daughter.
"No, I can tell the face of a kid who's a high school grad. They look as dumb as anyone else around. There's no way such a kid could speak fluent Spanish."
His insulting words, thrown at me even as he stepped in my way, left me stunned. In front of my child. He had no qualms about looking down on another child he had just met. I couldn't believe how nasty he was. Though my daughter might not understand what high school grad means, she probably sensed she was being spoken ill of. Seeing her face scrunch up as if she were about to cry, I stared fearlessly at my ex. "Would you mind not insulting children? Aren't you ashamed as a father?" He brushes off my anger nonchalantly.
"Hey, I'm just telling the truth. It's presumptuous for a high school grad to enter a Spanish contest. Just play in the park where you belong."
Having said his piece, my ex-husband grabs his child's hand and vanishes into the crowd. While a deep anger starts to bubble up within me, I catch my daughter's anxious face and rein in my emotions. "It's all right. You've practiced a lot. If you do just like you practiced at home, you'll win for sure. Mommy guarantees it." Our eyes meet, and I speak softly to her. I need to stay strong for her. She nods, slowly, digesting my words. After registering, I leave my daughter and enter the spectator area. Now all I can do is believe in her ability. I take a deep breath and wait for her contest to begin. Including my ex-husband's child, most of the young contestants were nervous and stumbled through their speeches. As for my daughter, even without parental bias, I thought she was by far the best, delivering her speech in fluent Spanish without hesitation. My prediction was accurate. She won the Spanish speech and debate contest.
holding a large bouquet and with a medal around her neck. We leave the venue hand in hand. Next, we're going to celebrate with some steak, just as planned.
Abigail, wait up!
A loud voice chases after me from behind. I quickly shield my daughter behind me and turn around to face my ex-husband. His eyes are red-rimmed, as if he'd been crying. Peeking out from behind me, my daughter's medal catches his eye, and he looks at it enviously.
How can your kid win first place? There's no way a child raised by a high school grad could be so articulate.
Turns out, he's upset because his own child didn't place, while my daughter won the competition. He rants, assuming that my husband, my daughter, and I couldn't possibly speak Spanish. People leaving the venue glanced at him, puzzled by his outburst, but he seems oblivious.
Where did you enroll her? Or did you hire a tutor with whatever little you make?
We didn't enroll her in any classes, and we didn't hire a tutor, I reply plainly. His eyes widen in disbelief.
No way! You can barely speak Spanish yourself.
Did you forget about my job? His puzzled expression deepens. I work in an import-export office, where speaking some Spanish makes the job easier. Besides, my grandfather lives in Spain. I've been accustomed to Spanish since I was little. My daughter learned it naturally, talking with him. I stroke my daughter's head as she peeks out from behind me. I've conversed in Spanish with my grandfather ever since I can remember. I chose my line of work because it allowed me to use my Spanish skills. My daughter started speaking Spanish naturally because we've been video calling with her great-grandfather to show him how she's growing up. I've never forced her to learn Spanish. All my husband and I did was support our daughter. Follow your passion and you'll excel. As they say, my daughter has grown to converse with her native Spanish-speaking grandfather without needing a translator. My ex starts trembling as he listens to my explanation, his face flushed a deep red, boiling with humiliation. Losing to someone he had looked down on must have been a more significant blow to his ego than he had anticipated.
I can't believe this. I'm going to complain to the organizers. My child was unfairly judged.
In a fit of rage, my ex-husband stormed back into the venue, leaving our child behind. Not wanting to leave my child alone, I waited silently for him to return. Soon enough, security escorted him out of the building, gripping him by both arms. Gritting his teeth, it was clear he wasn't thrilled that my daughter won. As he aggressively approached me, a woman's voice suddenly called out to him. "James, what a coincidence running into you here!" She wore a crisp pantsuit and had an event badge hanging around her neck. My ex-husband's anger cooled as his shoulders tensed up. I couldn't just walk away, so I stood there, keeping my daughter behind me, watching. "So, James, you have a kid. I heard you were single. Is this woman next to you your wife?" Caught off guard, I shook my head vehemently. "No, he's my ex-husband." "Oh, so this child is yours and James's." She eyed the boy standing next to my ex-husband with her piercing gaze. "No, that's the son from the woman he married after divorcing me." Her eyes lit up. Sweating and looking pale, my ex-husband was clearly distressed. What happened next needs no explanation. Sensing impending chaos, I fled the scene. It turns out, after marrying a college-educated woman, he had been having an affair with another educated woman involving in the Spanish speech and debate tournament. She quickly realized she was his side chick upon seeing him with a child. Naturally, the affair infuriated his well-educated wife. She took their child and went back to her parents' house the next day. Now, he's scrambling to pay child support, alimony for the divorce, and education loans. Word got around his office about how he had been serial dating women based on their educational backgrounds, forcing him to resign. As for my daughter, she later participated in the national Spanish speech competition. While she didn't win, her near-native language skills drew much attention, and her interest in Spanish only grew. With my current husband's support, I left my long-time job at a trading company. Now, I teach Spanish from home and assist my grandfather with translating novels.
My name is Evelyn, a 28-year-old office worker. I've been dating Andrew for 2 years, and he recently proposed to me. Andrew is 30 years old and works at a regional bank. His dad also works at the same bank and is branch manager. I met Andrew through a friend's introduction. He might seem a bit unreliable at times, but he's a kind person. I like that he's not the type to forcefully lead me. I've always struggled with people who don't listen to others and just pull you along in their direction. Maybe I prefer someone like him because my dad also listens to others and respects their opinions. I lost my mom about 10 years ago and have been living with my dad since then. My mom had always been frail, but her health worsened after I graduated from elementary school, leading to repeated hospital admissions. My mom had a weak heart, and I only remember her as always lying down. My dad, while running his company, took care of my mom and also looked after me. From my upper elementary school years, I started helping with cooking and taking care of my mom. I've been doing it since I was little, so I never thought it was too hard. Evelyn, I've always put you through a lot. My dad would always say, I don't mind at all. I would reply, to which my dad always seemed apologetic. Then, when I was in my senior year of high school, my mom passed away, and my dad's grief was immense. It made me realize how deeply he loved her. I thought it would be nice to marry someone who would care about me as much as he did. Andrew, whom I met through a friend, somehow reminded me of my dad, and I quickly fell for him. I knew he worked at a bank, but I didn't know his dad was also a banker, and a branch manager at that. My dad runs a small company, so he has dealings with banks, but probably not with branch managers. I even thought about joining my dad's company when I graduated from college. Can I work at your company, Dad? I asked casually, but he answered seriously. We can't have you here, because being family might lead to favoritism, he said firmly. Indeed, my dad as an employer would have to be careful around me, and the other employees might struggle with how to treat me. So, I didn't end up working at my dad's company. After accepting Andrew's proposal, I was set to meet his parents. I had already told my dad about planning to marry Andrew. Congratulations! I'm sure your mom would be happy, my dad said, almost in tears. After meeting his parents, I'll introduce him to you, Dad. If you love him, I won't say anything, he assured me. On the day I was to meet Andrew's parents, my dad, seeing me nervous, said, Just be yourself. Pretending to be someone you're not gets exposed quickly. Have you ever pretended, Dad? I asked curiously. When I met your mom's parents, I tried using formal language I never use, and they saw right through it, he shared with a laugh. Thanks to my dad's story, my nerves eased a bit, and I left home more relaxed. When we arrived at Andrew's house, his parents greeted us. Thank you for coming all this way. Don't be nervous, we just want to talk, they added, surprisingly casual. It felt like I was a job applicant. Even though I looked to Andrew for help, he just played dumb. In the guest room, I handed the gift I brought to Andrew's mom. It's just a small thing from a famous local bakery. It was a specialty of a famous candy shop in the neighborhood. I've never seen this before. Such a trivial item indeed, she said, throwing the box carelessly. I was more shocked at how she mistreated food than how she treated my gift. As I was reeling from her actions, Andrew's dad asked, "Evelyn, was it? Where do you work?" It felt more like an interrogation than a conversation. Before I could even greet them, Andrew's dad bombarded me with questions. "I work at Stellar Tech Solutions," I replied as cheerfully as I could. "Ah, Stellar Tech Solutions. Do we have any business with them at our bank?" "My company is a large corporation, so we don't really deal with his regional bank." "What does your dad do?" "He runs a small business." My dad's business isn't that small, but I downplayed it. "So he's like a self-employed person," Andrew's dad concluded on his own. I wanted to correct him, but I didn't want to come off as disrespectful. Perhaps he thought he couldn't criticize me for working at a large company, but felt free to comment on my dad's smaller business. "Was your mom a homemaker?" Andrew's mom asked, pouring coffee. "She passed away about 10 years ago. I've been living with my dad since then." Andrew's parents seemed taken aback by this. "So it's been just the two of you?" Faced with the insistent questioning of Andrew's parents, "Yes, it's just been my dad and me," I answered clearly. Even though it's a father-daughter household, I was already working, and I was 18 when my mom passed away. I don't have the image of a struggling dad with a young child. It must have been hard without a mom, right? Life gets messy, doesn't it? No, I was already grown up, so it was okay. Unhappy with my response, Andrew's parents grimaced. I regretted being honest. They seemed to look down on father-daughter households. "Did you use scholarship to attend university?" The conversation shifted unexpectedly. "No, my dad paid for my tuition normally." I spoke the truth, but Andrew's dad seemed skeptical. It's though to keep paying back scholarships after marriage. Many people are still doing it. He seemed to assume I had scholarship debt. "How much do you have to pay back?" He had convinced himself that I borrowed a scholarship. I didn't borrow any scholarship, so I don't have to repay anything. I was surprised that someone like him, who hardly listens, could be a branch manager. But it wasn't just him. Andrew's mom also had strong misconceptions. Struggling in a father-daughter household and having to repay a scholarship, she said pityingly. "Planning to pay it all off quickly once you marry Andrew, right?" she accused with a mean look. Looking to Andrew for support, he just nodded along with his mom. Left with no one to help, I had to fend for myself. "There's no scholarship repayment, so don't worry," I insisted, clearly annoying them. Growing up in a father-daughter household, you can't listen to others, can you? Poor thing. Their prejudice against father-daughter households was frightening. "Your dad might be in debt too," Andrew's dad speculated wildly. Rather than an assumption, it's more like a fantasy habit. It's tough for self-employed businesses these days. If he runs away in debt, it's a big problem for the bank. "Once you marry Andrew, you might force our bank to lend you money." In their minds, they had concocted an elaborate story. "We don't have any dealings now, but I'll remember the name and make sure not to lend," Andrew's dad said with a disturbing resolve. I had already given up on marrying Andrew by this point. More than given up, it was clear I couldn't live with these people. I felt embarrassed for ever thinking Andrew was like my dad. My dad was nothing like this heartless man. A daughter from a father-daughter household, self-employed with debt, is not a suitable match for Andrew, Andrew's mom yelled. I checked Andrew's reaction. He seemed to agree, nodding again. Disgusted, I realized Andrew's dad was boasting. "There are many women who approach us for our status. Marrying rich is a shortcut to wealth," he said smugly. Seeing him boast while I was being insulted and Andrew not defending me, I lost all affection for him. The interview-like atmosphere I felt when I first came was accurate. This wasn't a meet-the-parents visit, but an interview to check if I was a suitable match for their son. It was an unfair interview, designed for them to feel superior. I realized I had come to a terrible place. In a way, it was good. Becoming family with these people unknowingly would have been awful. Though it was unpleasant, I was close to marrying into this. Still wanting to belittle me, Andrew's parents weren't done. But I wasn't that naive. "It seems I failed your interview, so I'll take my leave." Leaving these words behind, I left Andrew and his parents and walked out of his house. Andrew didn't come after me, marking the end of our relationship. Seeing my strained face upon returning home, my dad asked, "Are you okay? What happened?" Though I had put on a brave face leaving Andrew's home, seeing my dad made all my tension unravel. I burst into tears and clung to him. Without a word, my dad just waited for me to stop crying. "I won't be marrying him," I confessed. Dad wasn't surprised, having guessed from my state that the marriage was off. "For the first time in my life, I was completely ridiculed by strangers." Crying so much washed away my sadness, leaving only anger towards Andrew and his parents. They looked down on us, saying it's pitiful to be in a father-daughter household, calling us poor. Dad just nodded silently as I vented. "And they even assumed I had to repay scholarship for university and was marrying for that reason." Listening to my unceasing anger, Dad's brow furrowed. I was the only one venting my anger, but once I vented all my frustrations, I felt relieved. As if waiting for this, Dad finally spoke. "There was no fate with Andrew, it seems." Indeed, there was no destiny with him. The words of his parents hurt, but I was most angered by Andrew, who didn't stand up for me. "By the way, which bank does Andrew work at?" I told Dad the name of the bank and where Andrew's dad was a branch manager. "Which branch manager is that?" Looking at a business card Andrew had given me earlier, I answered Dad. "My lovely daughter has been insulted. Maybe it's time for a little payback," Dad said with a meaningful smile. A week later on a holiday, we had an unexpected visit at our home. It was Andrew's dad. "Sorry for the other day. What brings you here today? More sarcasm?" I said through the intercom. "Evelyn, is your dad home? May I speak with your dad, please?" Taken aback by his unusually humble attitude, Dad said, "Let him in. I have something to say too." With a slightly intimidating look, I led them into our house. Upon entering, Andrew and his dad immediately apologized. "We're so sorry about the other day," Andrew's dad said, bowing deeply. Andrew apologized in the same manner. "We can't afford to forget the company auditing our bank's accounts," Dad said, causing them to bow even lower. "Please, can we keep this incident from the main branch?" Confused, I asked Dad, who then explained what had happened. The day after I visited Andrew's house, Dad went to Andrew's dad's branch. The branch manager had exchanged business cards with Dad, but hadn't realized what my dad's company did. Panicked, another bank employee explained to the manager that Dad's company was auditing their bank. "You are the branch manager? I came to thank you for yesterday. My daughter visited your house." "Your daughter? Yesterday?" Andrew's dad was confused, not realizing Dad was my father. "I'm sorry for any rudeness my daughter may have caused," Dad said sarcastically. The other bank employees were flustered, not knowing how to handle the situation. The president of the accounting firm that spoke directly with the bank's executives had come to their branch, causing a stir. The branch manager is confused, even though he greets Dad politely, saying he shouldn't be rude. Although they welcomed Dad respectfully, the branch manager was perplexed. "It seems my daughter might have been rude, but you were quite disrespectful too. I heard from her. We can end our dealings with your bank if that's what you prefer." "What?" Dad's command, meant as a joke, sent shockwaves through everyone, including the branch manager. Even Dad was surprised by the strong reaction. Dad hurried back home, and it turned out to be more effective than I had imagined. Andrew's dad hadn't realized until the end that my dad and the president of the accounting firm were the same person. My dad's company isn't well known generally, but seems to be a big player in its industry. Trying to give Andrew's dad a bit of shock, my dad visited him, causing quite a stir at the bank. The other bank employees were panicked and apparently urged Andrew's dad to apologize. Then Andrew and his dad came together to apologize. "You shouldn't be apologizing to me. You should be apologizing to my daughter first." I was surprised by the firm tone of my dad, which I had never heard before. Andrew and his dad seemed even more shocked, crawling on the floor. "We are sorry for the other day. We were disrespectful and have reflected on it. I didn't say anything wrong, so we're good, right?" Andrew said with a sarcastic smile, looking up at me. "I'm mostly angry with you for not standing up for me." Faced with my glare, Andrew pressed his forehead back to the floor. He probably wanted to reconcile with me. I had many missed calls from him on my mobile phone. I hadn't noticed them because I blocked his number, but after they left, I saw how serious it was. It was a good opportunity for my payback. How does it feel to apologize deeply to the father-daughter household you mocked as poor? Neither Andrew nor his dad could respond. Give me my regards to Isabella, who always had snide remarks. The part about stopping the business was a joke, and I won't tell the main office, but please stay away from my daughter from now on. Dad spoke sternly again, and they could only keep apologizing, prostrated on the floor. By the time they left, Andrew's dad's forehead was red from bowing so much. Dad and I burst into laughter watching this. Mocked by us, Andrew and his dad shared a wry smile with each other. Their apology and my chance to talk back marked the definitive end of my relationship with Andrew. Later, I heard that Andrew's dad was demoted from his position as branch manager after the incident reached the main office. Andrew was transferred to a distant branch, seemingly ending his chances for advancement. I started dating someone new, introduced by a friend. I didn't want to experience the same pain, so I checked with him from the start. "I'm from a father-daughter household. Is it okay?" He looked puzzled but assured me it didn't matter. "Do your parents have any prejudice against father-daughter households?" He looked surprised again, but laughed and denied it. We've just started dating, but it feels like things might work out well with this new guy.